I am really excited for this topic. We've talked about stuff of Myrddin in 2 videos in the past, and those have focused on mages, because mages seem like the obvious choice for a power-focused item. But in all honesty, what I was able to find, the best gods for Stuff of Myrddin for this mage item are not mages. The best gods, in my opinion, if you can fit it in, are absolutely guardians. Of course, there are some super strong mages. I talked about Harbour, Nox, Merlin, now that it's changed probably. So it's not like this item is bad on mages in comparison to guardians. It's just that certain guardians have insane potential with Stuff of Myrddin, and that's what we're going to look into today. While most of you have probably seen my other videos on Stuff of Myrddin at this point, if not, they'll be linked here so you can check them out, and they're also linked at the end. A quick recap for those of you who haven't seen them on the stats of Stuff of Myrddin. I'm going to keep this very brief. It's 10% cooldown reduction, 100 magical power, it's shown wrong here. And the passive is, when your ultimate ability has finished casting, your next non-ultimate ability cast within the next 10 seconds will have no cooldown, but will only deal 70% of its normal damage and healing. This can only occur once every 45 seconds. Now, the reason why I think Guardians are better for this item is because I think that the damage reduction has less of an effect on many Guardian abilities. Many Guardian abilities aren't so much about the damage as they are about their CC effects or other secondary effects, and they can lead to really nice combos. And with that, let's get into the gods. The first god here is Ares, and Ares is already a pretty hefty start. With Ares, you can use the ultimate and then you can use your chains twice. That means a total of 6 chains. So if you are able to burn someone's beats before, if they don't have beats or any other CC immunity or winged blade, then they're pretty much done for here. Because this is a disgusting amount of lockdown and a disgusting amount of damage at the same time. You can just walk them around for a very long time with this. You can also use the 2 twice, but it doesn't stack or anything, so it's after each other, and you can use the 3 twice after each other, but the main selling point here is definitely the 1, and that alone makes it super strong on him. The problem with Ares and Stuff of Myrddin, of course, is that it's very hard to even fit into a bruiser build for him. He's not a god that you typically build focused on power, rather auras, and get some power that way. Especially in non-conquest modes, this will be absolutely disgusting though. And also the ult sets it up very nicely, and you will often use it as an engage with Ares anyways. Artio is interesting in other ways. Due to her stance swap, she has a very easy time proccing this item, but often will kind of proc it involuntarily because she just needs to get into another stance. That way she can use her 1 twice in both stances, which is interesting for extra healing especially, or just extra damage. The more interesting part to me is the 2. You can use the cripple twice in a row, and I think that is the most dangerous effect for her, because that cripple field is already very long, but this way it's an insane amount of lockdown that also doesn't suffer from any diminishing returns because it's an area effect on herself. And if you chain this perfectly, you can actually go into your bear stance and use the stun when the first cripple runs out, so the enemy can't use that time frame to maybe get out and then go back into the cripple, so you can guarantee a lockdown for a very long time. Or of course you can stun twice, or you can use each version of the 3 twice. 2 dashes doesn't sound too bad to me, very good escape potential. And the 2 roots also have their place, I guess, and 2 heals that way too. Unfortunately, you cannot overlap them basically. So what I was trying to do is I was trying to see if I hit the last ticks, but not the first tick of the first 3, and then use the 3 again if the first tick of the second 3 would root. But that's not the case. It counts as an individual cast of the ability, and you have to hit all ticks of 1 instance here. You can't just try and get enough ticks across both instances. The downsides with Artio are that it's not that easy to fit into a build, and also you have to keep a very close track of it because you will get the item effect quite often. You have to make sure that you will get it when you need it, or that you utilize it when you get it. Still, overall, I would consider her a strong user. Next up is Athena, and she's also interesting for Stuff of Myrddin because she is one of those gods that can actually go into a power-focused build if she wants to. You can double dash with a 1, not all too impressive, but you can use 2 taunts, and that can be massive setup for your team in certain situations. You can also use 2 3s, and that I think is very interesting if you're going for a more damage-focused build, because what you can do is use the 3 on an enemy if you're close to them, then taunt them, and then use the 3 again. And if your taunt is level enough, then you should be able to keep them in both of these threes and possibly hit them for a lot of damage, at least 3 instances, if not 4. The problem for Athena is, of course, that her ultimate requires a teammate to be nearby for it to even work at all. I think for jungle Athena, this is kind of more usable because you can kind of spam the ult a little bit more aggressively, but as a support Athena, for example, it's going to be harder to fit in. Then again, with a support Athena, you're probably not going to build stuff of Myrddin. So I think it has its place, even though it is a bit more conditional and maybe better executed if you have a friend you're playing with. With Bacchus, everything is pretty straightforward. You use the ult and you can drink twice to get super drunk, but you should also be drunk before you use the ult, so that doesn't really make sense. You can use your belly flop twice, or you can use your belch of the gods twice. Not really that much potential compared to some other gods, but the benefit here is that the knock up isn't really reduced, so you can benefit from that part of the 2 twice. He doesn't stand out to me in terms of the combo potential or anything, but it's also not terrible for it either. And speaking of combo potential, let's talk about combo Cabrakan, because this guy absolutely smacks with this item. I mean, Cabrakan already smacks with his combos in general, but did you realize that he usually uses his tectonic shift early in the fight to lock someone down? And you realize that he usually has 2 hard-hitting abilities that he uses to follow up as a burst combo, as long as you're building him at least a little bit more bruiser or damage focused. Well, then you realize that he can now do the Seismic Crush twice, or he can do the Reflection Shield twice, and that is going to hurt. If you want a little bit more CC, then you use the 1 twice in a row, even though the second stun will have some diminishing returns. If you want to have a little bit more damage, then you use the 2 twice in a row. Using the 3 twice in a row is possible technically, but almost entirely pointless because you could just keep channeling it. Unless you want to reposition, but then really just use the 1 or 2. It does way more for you. I feel like this and Ethereal Staff may actually push Cabrakan back into the meta because his one-shot potential is going to be so much higher as a jungler than it was before. We're going to see how it turns out at the end, but I am super excited for this one because I haven't seen Cabrakan all that much in a long time. So combo potential is there, and he usually starts off with his ultimate anyways, so perfect fit in anyway really. Cerberus is an interesting one. I think he can somewhat utilize it because it works as expected on all of his abilities. The question is how exactly you want to do that. You could, for example, use the ultimate and not use your 2 afterwards, and then use the 1 to stun the enemy, use the 2 to activate the effect of the 3 heads again, and then use the 1 to stun again with diminishing returns. That would be a possibility, and also get relatively high damage numbers. What you could also do is use the 2 twice for a lot of protection shred and a slow, and then you hit them again with the dot and the protection shred is already applied and they're still slowed, which could hurt a lot. Or you could use the 3 twice and jump around and heal more. I think all of these applications are possible, and you can definitely engage with the ult with Cerberus, which makes this a little bit more useful. But at the same time, I don't think he's like an outstanding user of this just yet, though I want to see some of the combo potential with the 1 and 2 and some of the high numbers that he can reach with a more magic damage focused build that way. Fafnir, on the other hand, is probably one of the worst guardians for this item. While he does get the effect on his 1, 2 and 3, and he can even use the 2 on multiple targets with the Chorus, that doesn't really matter all that much because he only gets it after his ultimate has finished. So I can see some niche application maybe in duel where it would make sense to use the abilities multiple times, but generally speaking, I don't see all too much utility in this compared to many other guards that just have more of an upfront benefit. You simply want to try and finish most fights while still being in your dragon stance and not having to rely on getting out of it first to get the full effect of your items, so I don't think it's that beneficial. And that brings us to the, in my opinion, most exciting user of this item, being Ganesha. Now Ganesha isn't as straightforward smack into your face as Cabrakan, but the benefit for him can be even higher. So you can use the 1 twice for a decent amount of damage, which is nice. You can also use the 2 twice for a lot of control, similar to what you can do with Artio. That's all great and nice and all, but have you considered the 3? Now, some of you are maybe aware that Ganesha's ult is one of the highest damaging abilities in the game. The problem is that it's super hypothetical because a god will never stay in this ultimate. They will either walk out or jump out or get beats and get out or whatever. If you catch an enemy that doesn't have an escape or a CC immunity of some sort to get him out of this very, very quickly, they are in for a world of pain. So you're probably familiar with using the ultimate and then using the 3 to lock an enemy on the barrier as soon as they try to cross it, and that deals a whole lot of damage already. It can pretty much take down a variety of targets even with a bruiser build. But with this, you can lock them on that for the double amount of time, because the knock-up isn't even affected by diminishing returns from what I can tell. So what that means is, while this first 3 will deal slightly less damage, the ultimate damage is unchanged, and that will tick the whole time through while the enemy is locked down. I tested with a moving bot, and you should be able to get 6 to 7 ticks on the enemy the moment they walk onto the barrier. So really, at that point, the enemy has no choice to either stay inside of the barrier and maybe get collapsed on by your teammates, or simply walk onto the barrier and take a ton of pain, unless they already have beats ready or they have some other escape to get out of it very, very quickly. Ganesha can also work surprisingly well with bruiser builds, so this is absolutely an option that could work for him. It is more hypothetical than Cabrakan for sure, it's more situational, but when you can pull it off, it is absolutely disgusting. The next card is not as nasty, but still quite interesting, and that's Gap. Yes, you can use his rollout twice, but I don't really see why you would use that after your ultimate anyways, so rather unlikely. You can use the Shockwave knockup twice, which in itself is already pretty good, because in combination with the ultimate, that's a long time to have a target locked down. But the craziest part with Gap is definitely the 3. You can place 2 shields on different targets. You can use the cleanse on the same target twice after each other, or on 2 different targets. And that adds a massive amount of utility to Gap as a utility-focused character. It's gonna be hard to fit that into a support Gap, and the problem is that it only happens after the ultimate. But I think for solo Gaps or for jungle Gaps, this is an option worth considering, as long as you are able to build around it somehow. Jormungandr is again a very interesting use of this item. With Jormungandr, it's especially interesting because we already seen him even in the SPL with Mage builds as a mid, so there's definitely reason to consider this item. It also happens after his ult finishes, so the moment he lands, he basically gets more damage potential no matter which way you use it, and I think that's pretty nice. So you can use the 1 twice, and then if you just have that 1 pull from the ult, you'll immediately have 3 pulls for your 2, and you don't rely on your 3 for that, which can be beneficial, so that can increase the damage quite a lot. You can also use the 2 itself twice in a row, which again can be quite a lot of damage. And you can also use the 3 twice in a row, meaning you can use it to have a very safe way to escape, which can be very nice, especially for Mage Jormungandr. If you get picked out once after using it, you just use it again. Or you can use it to knock up an enemy twice as well. So a lot of setup potential that way, and I can definitely see that being utilized in one way or another. So I'd say he's also among the stronger users at least. And then we have Khepri. Khepri is technically interesting because he's one of those guards that kind of can make use of Spear of the Magus damaged builds if you really want to. The problem for Khepri is the way it is utilized here, because you use the ultimate in order to get this effect, and Khepri doesn't really use his ultimate just randomly in a team fight, but rather to save an ally, and at that point you often already expended your kit basically. It's nice for the 1 because the second grab will actually have no diminishing returns. It's a pull that doesn't get this applied, so you can pull twice for the long duration, which is good. And with the 2, you can, I guess, get some more ticks. With the 3, you can lock 2 enemies down. Nothing super fancy though, and I think the ultimate plus the unconventional build style really limits the usage for Khepri compared to many other gods. So I don't think we're going to see that much. But what we're definitely going to see is Kumbhakarna, because I'm going to play that. It's absolutely gross. Now with Kumbhakarna, it's not so much that it's gross because of the damage, but because of the insane lockdown potential. Kumbhakarna is already a god with insane lockdown potential on a single target, and that just got ramped up even more. Now you can use the ult and you can use the 1 twice, and you can dash around or do extra damage that way, sure. You can use the ult and use the 2 twice, and you will root the enemy twice because there's no diminishing returns on roots, and you will root them for the full duration, so you have them under complete lockdown that way. And you still deal loads of damage at the same time, and you still have your mess available for a later point as well. You can also use the mess twice. Diminishing returns applies here or affects this here, but it's still pretty good for a long time of getting someone out of a fight. So I absolutely think while he may not be the super strongest user in terms of damage, Kumbhakarna is going to be a super annoying user at least. And speaking of annoying, that also applies for Kuzenbo. With Kuzenbo you can use the 1 twice, which isn't really all that effective because the first kappa will disappear once you spawn the second one, which I think is unfortunate, but it's simply how these pet mechanics work. But you can also use your 2 twice. And yes, you can stack your 2. So you can have the double reflect going on, though keep in mind that the first reflect will have the reduced reflect value. I tested this, it doesn't actually get the full value compared to the second reflect. The question is how often you use your reflect right after your ultimate. Your 3 on the other hand can also be used twice and actually does not suffer from diminishing returns either, so you can push enemies with the ultimate and then twice with a 3 and lock them down for a very, very, very long time, and that is going to be annoying. And considering that Kuzenbo's power scaling are actually pretty solid, I would say that makes him a decent and very annoying user. Sobek, in my opinion, less so. First of all, Sobek power builds don't really work all that well, and yes, you can use the 1 twice, but how often are you in a position where you can just pluck around 2 different targets and it's actually going to be useful for your team over being detrimental? You can also use the 2 twice for knockbacks and you can use the 3 twice. The only way where I can see this being beneficial is by using the second one a little bit later when the enemy tries to reposition and just go for the throw again, but it's a bit more niche. I want to try it out anyways, but it's maybe not quite as crazy as some of the others here. Sylvanus, as some of you may know, makes pretty good use of power items due to the very high scalings, especially on his ultimate, over 100% there for the full ticks, and there's not that much counterplay due to the duration. So with that in mind, we can definitely utilize this item. The effects for his other abilities are a bit, well, depends on how you want to look at it. You can use the 1 twice for more lockdown, of course, which is great, and you can use the 2 twice, and normally the first instance of damage will be reduced. But there is this specific situation with Sylvanus where for some reason if you use the wisps twice in a row very quickly, the damage on the enemy will not be reduced for the first instance. I'm assuming it's some sort of check that if the first instance of the first ability hasn't ticked yet and the second one gets sent out, then somehow they overlap and they both get recognized as the second hit after the Staff of Myrddin, and that way it deals quite a fair bit of damage. Well, the question is if that's going to stay in the game, and without it the dot would be a fair bit lower. You can also use the pull twice, which I guess is nice if you miss the first one to have another chance to secure it, or to actually pull 2 targets towards you. So the question is when you want to do that, or again, similar to Sobek, when an enemy is running away and you just catch them again after pulling them before already. So Sylvanus, also one of the stronger users, but we'll have to see what happens with this too. Terra is fairly interesting because you can already use her 1 twice as is if you go through one of your barriers. That means if you use one of your barrier abilities, your 2 or your 3, and then use your ultimate and then use your dash, though that you actually get the benefit on the dash, then you can actually dash up to 4 times. Question is, do you really benefit that much from dashing 4 times in most situations? I suppose if you land multiple of these dashes on enemies and chain them with crushing earth, there is a point to be made here, but the problem is then you sacrifice a fair bit of your CC that way as well. If you use the 2 twice, you get 2 claps, but you can only use them after each other because obviously the second activation will activate Crushing Earth and remove the first of these instances instead of placing a second one. When it comes to the third ability, placing the second monolith will remove the first monolith as long as the monolith stands. If you use the 3, then dash through it to get to the damaging ground version, then it will not be removed if you place the 3 again, and you can actually dash through the second one as well, and you can have 2 damaging areas which will both stay functional. That said, I don't think overall the use here is super great, and I think it's very conditional for Terra for this to be very effective, and I also wouldn't necessarily see power builds being the primary choice for her. I may be mistaken on Terra, and also the benefit for her is that her ultimate is often used aggressively, but I see other gods making better use of this item overall. Xing Tian is again an interesting middle ground. He makes pretty good use of power because his ultimate overall scales for 175% if you get the full hit in, so that's nice. But I don't know how much you really get out of the abilities. You can definitely use the 1 twice for a lot of damage that ticks simultaneously. And you can also use the 2 twice for a lot of knock-up potential, which I think is probably the most frequent usage, where you just lock enemies down after already throwing them for even longer. Or you can use the 3 twice and just jump around 4 times. So none of these options is terrible. None of these options is completely insane compared to some other gods. I would say it's solid if you can somehow make a power Xing Tian build or a hybrid Xing Tian build work, depending on what role you play him in as well. Our last contender here is Ymir. Now yeah, power Ymir is not terrible in terms of damage output either, but I'm still not sure if I would consider him a solid user of the item overall. The problem with Ymir is that you often use other abilities before his ultimate and not after. So when you get the effect when everything else is over, it doesn't really benefit you all that much. If you place a second wall, the first wall will actually be removed, unfortunately. This means there's still some interesting counterplay you do with that. Like, for example, you have an enemy that jumps over a wall and then you place the wall in another direction again and you can avoid them that way, but it's more of an outlier case, I would say. You can use the 2 twice and you obviously get the basic attack amplification as well, so that is definitely interesting. And you can also use the freeze twice, which can be nice in some situations, but suffers from diminishing returns. So overall interesting, but I just see more unique potential in other gods or more overall usability of the item. That's it for the Guardians. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to click the sub button and maybe the bell, it really helps me out, and maybe the like button if you want to see more of the item tests for the other items that we haven't done yet. I am super hyped to play around with these Guardian interactions with this item, but the Mage ones are definitely fun as well, so you can check those out here as well. They will be linked around here. And other than that, thank you guys so much for watching, and hope to see you all for the next one tomorrow. DukeSloth, out.